Hey everybody, welcome back to the Sports Podcast. I'm Jacob Murphy. My partner in this, Spencer Rath, is not here today due to some extracurricular issues. So today I will be talking about the college football playoff and all the disaster scenarios that could come up because this weekend being rivalry weekend, famous Iron Bowls this weekend. So a lot of things could go wrong this weekend. So as college football playoff stands right now, the top four teams are Alabama, Clemson, Miami, and Oklahoma. And that will there are new rankings coming out tonight, and those new rankings shouldn't change. Having all of those teams won this past weekend, so Alabama's the best team in the league right now, sitting at 10-0. But they're going up against the number 6 Auburn team this year, very strong Auburn team coming off of a really strong win against the number 1 Georgia team, actually beating Georgia 40-17 when Georgia was number 1. Georgia's sitting at number 7 right now. Disaster scenarios for this week. So if Alabama ends up losing to Auburn, that potentially could put Auburn into the running to be in the college football playoff. Put them in because that would put them beating Georgia and Alabama. That's defeating two number 1 teams this year. That's actually very strong from an Auburn team no one thought was actually going to do anything in the SEC West this year. And if Auburn beats Alabama, that puts Auburn chance to play Georgia again in the SEC championship game. The 2 versus the 3 right now in college football playoff is Clemson Miami, but those two teams will face each other in the ACC championship game. Having Clemson won the Atlantic after they defeated NC State a couple weeks ago, and Miami locking up the Coastal after sweeping through the Coastal. Yeah, so they swept through the Coastal, and so that team, the winner of that game, will guarantee be in the college football playoff. There's no ifs, ands, or buts. After the ACC championship game in Bank of America Stadium in Charlotte, North Carolina next weekend, one of those teams will be in the college football playoff. I think that the other team will be eliminated from contention from the college football playoff after one of them loses that game. If it's close, like 3 scores, and then say Alabama already lost to Auburn in SEC in Iron Bowl, then that could potentially put both of them still in it. I don't know. It's going to be hard for both of them to make it in. The college football playoff committee doesn't necessarily like the fact that there could be 2 ACC teams in right now. They like the prospects of 2 SEC teams being in right now, being SEC is the best conference in football. Oklahoma is actually on the bubble right now, being the 4 seed. They would face Alabama, but Oklahoma is playing a very strong West Virginia team this year. A very strong West Virginia team this week. Sorry, misspoke there. West Virginia is not in the rankings right now. They were earlier in the year. Plus, Oklahoma will be without Baker Mayfield this year. He's been suspended after team misconduct problems this weekend in their win at Kansas, with some obscene gestures and some obscene language towards Kansas players and fans this past Saturday after Oklahoma rolled with Kansas. I apologize, I'm not able to speak today. But yeah, so it should be interesting because without Baker Mayfield, Oklahoma is generally just not going to be as good. Is not going to be as good. Taking that Baker Mayfield is definitely the favorite to win the Heisman this year. So if Oklahoma loses, that could potentially put Wisconsin into the college football playoff, considering Wisconsin's the 5 seed and at 10-0 right now. Wisconsin is slated right now to make it to the Big Ten championship game, and right now they would end up facing Ohio State because Ohio State looks like they're going to win the Big Ten East, and the Big Ten West is basically Big Ten West has been locked up by Wisconsin, so Wisconsin will be in the Big Ten championship game. If they lose at all coming up, if they lose at all, they'll definitely be out. So they're not in right now, so they have to definitely win out. But I look forward to seeing a Wisconsin team in the college football playoffs, seeing if Oklahoma loses to West Virginia or if Alabama loses to Auburn, because this week Clemson is playing South Carolina. South Carolina, a very good team, actually struggled for about a quarter this weekend against Wofford. And Miami's playing Pitt. Pitt, who lost a battered and not well-played UNC team last Thursday night. I don't predict Clemson Miami losing right now before the ACC championship game. So those guys would definitely be in at the moment. But Oklahoma could definitely lose to West Virginia, and that would put a very strong Wisconsin team into the college football playoff. Now, the true disaster things would be if all of them lost. That would be the true disaster if all of them lost, and that would put Notre Dame back in contention, or like Ohio State back in contention. Okay, I know I've been talking about the college football playoff, the national implications of it, but right now with there being two ACC teams in the college football playoff, I'm talking for a second about the ACC and its championship game. Right in the ACC championship, the ACC championship would definitely feature Clemson and Miami. Okay, so the Orange Bowl has an automatic tie-in with the Atlantic Coast Conference, and typically their winner makes the Orange Bowl. But the winner of the ACC championship this year will definitely make the college football playoff, considering that neither one of them lose this week to their opponents in rivalry week. Clemson playing South Carolina, Miami playing Pitt. Miami's not really doesn't really have a what we call a rivalry during rivalry week, so they just generally played Pitt this year. So the winner of that game will definitely make the college football playoff, but the loser could potentially make the Orange Bowl. But if Alabama loses to Auburn or loses in the SEC championship game, and Oklahoma loses this week to West Virginia, considering they will not have a conference championship game because they're in the Big 12. The Big 12 is less than 12 teams. I know it sounds weird. The Big 10 is 12 teams, and the Big 12 is 10 teams. It's really stupid. It just sounds bad. So they will not have a conference championship game, which could potentially hurt them, considering there's a 10-0 Wisconsin team right behind them. Wisconsin will have a conference championship game. They'll most likely end up playing Ohio State, considering Ohio State does not lose this week to Michigan. Right now, with the Orange Bowl as it is, if Miami and Clemson both make it in, the Orange Bowl has an interesting decision to make. With a strong North Carolina State team, could definitely make the Orange Bowl. I think that would actually bring pretty good ratings. But North Carolina State is playing a surging UNC team this year. Yes, UNC only has 3 wins, but they're on a roll right now, having defeated Pitt. Their quarterback is playing really well coming off the bench after their starter Chaz Surratt got hurt in the game against Miami. That could potentially be a dangerous game for NC State. If NC State loses, they will have no chance to make the Orange Bowl. But what I'm thinking right now is that the Orange Bowl will definitely feature the loser of the ACC championship game instead of the winner, considering that the winner will make college football playoff, either being in the Rose Bowl or the Sugar Bowl, I believe is the other semifinal this year. So it's going to be interesting seeing what happens this weekend, considering Baker Mayfield's not playing. Baker Mayfield's probably going to win the Heisman, so Oklahoma will definitely miss him and making some really bad decisions on the sideline for Oklahoma this past weekend at Kansas. I don't know why he was acting out like that, playing a really bad 1-9 Kansas Jayhawks team, and he's the Heisman Trophy winner. He's potential to win the Heisman, and his team's in the college football playoff. So I don't really see, and that this weekend could potentially hurt his Heisman hopes because the Heisman committee doesn't necessarily like people with bad off the field reputations and bad out of game reputations. And this year, Baker Mayfield has shown that he is a little bit immature for being a senior and being a strong leader on this team. So they will definitely miss him on senior night against a strong West Virginia Mountaineers team. And Wisconsin is looking to win this week, and they really need Oklahoma to lose. Wisconsin is playing Minnesota. Minnesota is not ranked; they're 5-6. So Minnesota would need to win this game to even be bowl eligible. So I have a feeling Wisconsin will win this weekend. But if Oklahoma loses to West Virginia, Wisconsin will be in. Wisconsin's a hard-nosed, run the football team, and they're going to play really well, I feel, against Minnesota. Minnesota's not very strong, cannot defend the run. So that's most of the disaster scenarios right now. I do not want this college football playoff to end up being chalk. All 4 of these teams make it in. I'm tired of Alabama being that team, being the number 1 team all the time, and Nick Saban always leading his team to a national championship. I think it's time for a new team to win the SEC, for a new team to be in the national championship game. I think the Alabama dynasty, it's great for college football, and it is fun to watch, and they are a good team, but I think it's someone else's turn. This Miami team, most people don't like that turnover chain, the big gimmicky turnover chain, but I love that turnover chain. I think it's fun. I think they play really well with it, and I think it's Miami's time. I think Miami has a strong chance to beat Clemson in the ACC championship game, because Clemson will be facing a worse opponent than Miami will be this weekend, because South Carolina has just, generally struggled this year. So it's going to be interesting to see. I want Miami. I think Mark Richt deserves to be in the college football playoff. And Dabo Swinney has struggled a couple times this year. They struggled at NC State That was a great game. The atmosphere was electric in that building. I was personally there. It was a great game to watch, but they did struggle. They were down in the first half and to end the first half. So I think Miami could probably end up beating Clemson in the ACC championship game, and making the college football playoff, and potentially knocking Clemson out of the playoff race, which could enter in a good Wisconsin team. If Auburn beats Alabama and then beats Georgia in the SEC championship game, that could end up being a great college football playoff with four brand new teams, four teams who didn't make it last year. That's the disaster scenario for this year, is that there's brand new teams making it in. Last week I would have been talking about Oklahoma State potentially being in, but Oklahoma State did lose to Kansas State this past weekend at home, so they have no chance to make it in. So it's gonna be a fun year. Sit in front of your TV this weekend, Saturday, and watch some really good college football. It's rivalry weekend. I will be at North Carolina State versus UNC, covering that game. So that's gonna be a fun game to watch as well. So, if you can get a ticket to a game, get a ticket to a game. If you can't, sit in front of your TV with your little universal remote and watch some really good football. All right. I'll be back next time with the Sports Podcast. Hopefully my partner Spencer Rath will be back. So thank you for listening.